The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there, welcome to The West Stand, our new show that's out at the start of the week, the end of the week. We welcome guests from across the world of Leeds United, journalists, commentators, ex-players, and in today's case, directors. Dan Moylan with you, with Michael Normanton, and today's special guest is Angus Kinnear. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Welcome back. Looking forward to this one?
Always. Highlight of the year.
So as per the last couple of times we've done this, I think it's probably important that we just lay out our position on this one as well, because I'm really sensitive to the fact that such a wide view, spread of views among Leeds fans, really. So I think we know there's no perfect way to approach this, is that in the eyes of everybody. Some people will want us to be more hardline on you and get into you, others maybe less so. So everybody's idea about what this should be is going to be a little bit different. So I would just ask for your understanding on that point. We're here to do our best and just talk about what's happened at Leeds United and hopefully just get some answers on record about questions, concerns and things like that fellow fans are going to have. And as always, the tone will be respectful if we can possibly do that, because that's why we get to do these shows in the first place. We can't speak for everybody, Michael.
And you don't speak for me. I'm not going to be respectful. No, I will. Good, yeah. Best behaviour.
No, we don't claim to speak for anybody. We can only sort of aggregate the things we read and the broad set of like fan opinions, and again, just do our best to try and cover as many as possible. As always, there's been no vetting or screening of questions. You are coming in here blind.
Disappointingly.
Yeah. And nothing's off the table as far as we know.
Correct.
Yeah, and from our perspective, I don't think we'd agree to do it any other way. It's all or nothing, baby. So I think we were chatting about this in the run-up to doing this one, Angus, and the challenge I think we faced this year, because the more we do these, the more we learn, and I think we feel like we could, up to a certain point, guess what a large number of your answers might be this year, because you're likely, obviously, going to defend the club's position, the ownership, your staff, the players, the employees. So I think the challenge for us in this one is to make it kind of fruitful and substantial, and but we also do appreciate that it's a unique opportunity within football, and we are grateful for the chance to take part in it. So with that in mind, then let's start with last season. And we know, obviously, you're going to say that 90 points gets us up in most cases, in most seasons. But where Leeds are concerned, you've got to play the season that's in front of you. And it didn't quite happen last season. So beyond the 90 points getting you up most seasons, can you tell us how the club has analysed last season? So what did you take from it? Did you learn anything specific from it? And how can we avoid doing the same thing again? So,
I mean, you're right. The success or failure in terms of promotion, and our objective was promotion, is binary. So you either do it or you don't do it, and we didn't do it. So we have to look on the season as a failure. But as you analyse it, I think it's important that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of everything that we did achieve in that season and how close we came and how fine the margins were. So there are definitely learnings. There's definitely a desire in the club not to be in that position again. We were talking earlier about the playoffs and the final, and thinking, what a great day that could have been. And I walked down Wembley Way with half of the city, it seemed, in northwest London, thinking this really could be a great day for the club. And I finished it standing in the Royal Box on my own, having to shake the hands of every Southampton player, wish them well in the Premier League next season, as they then lifted a cup, 30 centimetres from my face and bounced up and down with the Royal Box bouncing in unison. And so there was a real feeling from all the directors, from the players, from the manager, that we didn't want that to happen again. And that's what we've worked hard across the summer to try and achieve, to make sure that we're more robust. Statistically, the best season to come back up, or your highest chance, is the first season you go back down. So we have missed that opportunity. But I think there are some things in terms of Daniel's tenure and the fact that he's been here a season longer, in terms of the summer that we were able to plan and structure, in terms of the start of the season that we've had, and in terms of the way we've been able to strengthen the squad. Obviously, there have been some significant departures, but I think we've had a very considered and structured approach, which was harder to do in the first season after coming down. So I start this season feeling more confident than I did last season, feeling that we're in a better place and really looking forward to the challenge.
No dicking around with the playoffs. Again, I'm going to chuck that one back at you.
Well, I said it once and it worked quite well, but if I say it again, I'll just have to accept that for the rest of the year, people will shout it at me in the street when we're not in the top two positions.
So the collapse after Easter, has there been internal analysis related to that? And what has that shown? Why did we fail late on, or was it just one of those things?
No, I mean we look at all the underlying data. Daniel's analysed it at length with his team. The 49ers and the recruitment team have done that as well. We've looked at where the gaps have been, what are the types of things that could have made us more successful. We were definitely over dependent on 2 or 3 key players, and the recruitment strategy across the summer has been to strengthen in some of those areas. We shouldn't have a position where I think the fullbacks. I think maybe Junior got 1, but I don't think Archie didn't score. I think that centre halves, when we lost Pascal, who was scoring quite regularly, we then didn't have any goals from Joe or Ethan, apart from Ethan in the cup game. In midfield, limited number of goals from, I think, 1 from Gruev, none from Kamara. So I think we need to create a team where the creativity and the goal threat comes from more areas, and I think we've that's one of the things I think it's been fairly clear that we've deliberately addressed. Without
giving too much away, has there been a shift in playing style, some little tweaks to that? Are you aware of?
I think Daniel's constantly reviewing the way that the team play. I think it depends on the personnel that you have in place. So I think last season at right back we had an incredibly talented 17-year-old, but it's a lot to expect him to be able to defend effectively and attack effectively. And now we've got Jayden Bogle, who I think has been in this division for many years and played many Premier League games, and I think is in a position where he can can have more of a threat from fullback. And I think when you look at the middle of the park, I think if Ethan can return to his holding midfielder position, which he didn't play for half of the season because of the loss of Pascal, then that allows Gruev to be more attacking, or Tanaka to be more attacking, or Joe Rothwell to be more attacking as well.
So a lot of the noise this summer has been around recruitment. Obviously, the loss of significant players. There's no nice way to lose 3 of your best players. There have been incomings as well. There was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth related to the incomings and some of the messaging. Do you believe that the club has given Daniel Farke a squad capable of getting to the top 2?
We certainly think that the squad is strong enough for promotion. I think we have, if you look at the value of the squad, I think it's probably one of the highest valued squads in the history of the Championship. I think it's probably the first or second highest wage bill in the Championship. So I don't think there's been any lack of commitment in terms of trying to make the squad as strong as possible, and everybody's aligned. The most important thing for everybody, for the owners, for the management, for Daniel, and for the players is to get promoted. But we don't want to underestimate this league. Last year nobody saw the threat of Ipswich. This season, I think on paper the league perhaps doesn't look quite as strong, but then you see Sunderland start, and I'm sure Burnley will be strong, and I'm sure Rob Edwards will pull things together at Luton, and they'll be strong as well. So it'll be a very competitive league, and the points total to go up will probably not be dissimilar from it's been every year over the past 20.
One of the late window issues was the failure to sign a number 10, and it was identified specifically by Daniel Farke after the Hull game in the press conference there. And to quote him, the club decided not to get one, and that was the club. It felt like there was a separation between manager and club there. Has there been friction around that and around the recruitment this summer?
No, I think the Daniel is incredibly collaborative. We're very lucky to have him as a manager. He's been really, really, really balanced, and you see, not only do you see the results you get, but you see how he works at Thorpe Arch, how he works with the players, and I think we've got an exceptionally talented manager, which is why he's proven to be one of the best at this level. And I think he's exactly the right manager for where Leeds United are now. In recruitment discussions, there's always tension, and there should be tension, and I think it's healthy. There is tension between the data team and the scouting team and the coaching staff and the manager and the ownership. But I think we had, really good constructive dialogue with Daniel. There are no players that everybody wasn't fully aligned on before we secured them. The process is much more collaborative than it has been historically. So everybody has a say. But Daniel and the recruitment team knew that the board supported us, pretty much unconditionally in terms of the players that we targeted and the players that were available to us. So I think, I'd probably give us a B+ if I was to grade the window in terms of what we wanted to do. We got our first choice right-sided centre half, and one of the things which will be has been a theme across the summer is getting to players who really wanted to play for Leeds United, and that's really hard because it surprised me how much players want to play in the Premier League versus the Championship. But when you get a player like Joe Rodon, who after Christmas last year or in the spring when we were doing our kit shoots, insisted on being in the kit shoots for the following season's kit, which obviously is a disaster for the retail team, because if we hadn't signed him, then we've got all the imagery would have been dead. But Joe was desperate to be here, and before we had even any discussions with Tottenham Hotspur or his agent, he was 6 months out showing his desire to be in at the club, and that's really important. So really good, strong replacement at right-sided centre half, strong replacement at right back. We're accepting we've lost a lot of potential in Archie, but I think for this coming season, Jayden should be able to perform, at or above Archie's level quite comfortably. Two good solutions, creative solutions at wing, with one in an emerging player with Largy, and one in Manor who's really proven at Champions League level, and I think has the ability to really dominate this league. And the one missing piece of the jigsaw, which Daniel was very fair to identify, was ideally to give it to give the window an A+ grade. We'd have secured a number 10. But those number 10s are, as Daniel did point out in his interview, are really hard to find. If you look at great number 10s in the Championship across the last few seasons, you've probably got Emi Buendia at Norwich and Pablo Hernandez. But there's not many others. It's a very hard position to recruit. It's a very hard position where you get goals and assists and a physical presence. And the players that we looked at, weren't available to us, or we didn't think were at the standard. And that was I see my sort of interpretation of Daniel's statement from a club perspective is, as a club, and I mean everybody at the club, we couldn't identify an attainable number 10 who was going to make us stronger than we are now. And we have some very talented creative players. So you've seen that Willie, can play at number 10, and I know Brendan, is struggling from a fan perspective because of his decision to go on loan. But I think if we'd have signed Brendan Aronson this season, this summer, even at half the price we actually signed him for in the Premier League, everybody would think that was a very credible replacement at number 10 at Championship level.
I don't think people would argue with the quality of the people that are already there. But just to pick on what you said there, that there's nobody available, people will seize upon that and will and probably when things go wrong, rather than maybe now when we're on the back of a couple of wins, and will say to you, that's a failure of recruitment or a failure of imagination or a failure of scouting, whatever it is. That it seems impossible to a fan's mind, and we, admittedly we're not behind the scenes and we don't know how these things work, but people will say, how can it be that you cannot identify a single player to add to this squad in a transfer window? I
think the other thing people will say is that, well, we did put an offer in for a number 10 and didn't go back in with Gus Hamer. It felt like we put the offer in, it was like, well, if they accept it, they do. If not, we'll go without.
Anyway, and just to add to that, sorry, Michael, I was going to say it's a low ball offer as well if the reporting is correct, and then so you put the bid in and then choose not to go back. So you've identified a player that you want, but then haven't followed up on that.
So I can talk about specifically about two examples. So two players that we thought would fit the bill, would be significantly better than who we have currently. And bear in mind, we're looking at replacing a £40 million player, which is obviously going to be challenging at Championship level. And Buendia was on our list, and very clearly from Aston Villa wasn't going to be released, and the player didn't want to come back down to Championship level. He felt he'd served his time at Championship level. And then Gustavo Hamer, who we've had an interest in before he went to Sheffield United, was another player who we felt would have significantly improved the team. Now, the way that transfer worked is we all assumed that there was no chance that Sheffield United would sell their star player to a promotion rival based on the prize and the size of what promotion's worth. So if they send him to Leeds United and we go up by 1 point and they don't, they've cost themselves, over £100 million in TV revenue. However, we were given some light and this is where the market works through agents and through contacts, that they might be open to an offer. Sheffield United are a difficult club to deal with at the moment because they're in an ownership transition. So there's no one there there's no friendly face you can ring up and try and get a sense of whether the player's for sale or not. So the only way to provoke the conversation was to make an offer, and we made an offer which we think was at a fair level. And they came back very clearly and said he was not for sale in this window to anybody, and he certainly wouldn't be on sale to Leeds United, and there was no price that could pull him away. And once you get that kind of feedback and you believe in that kind of feedback, then you have to move on. So very simply, Gustavo Hamer wasn't available for Leeds United in this window.
Were you only ever looking then at people who would come immediately into the team? Because listing some of those names there, Buendia was at Cultural Lyonnaise, he'd had time there. Pablo was obviously on a free. You've got Hamer was Coventry, but previously had come out of Holland, I think, and had not had a huge amount spent on him. It feels like there's not a speculative option from the bench even to being considered as a number 10.
And I think that's where we feel that within the creative players that we've got, there are options to play at number 10. Now I know it always feels, and the fans feel, that when Pirro is playing at number 10, that he's sort of shoehorned into that position, and that's probably not his ideal. But actually trying to find even an emerging talent that can play that position. And if Pirro had played in every game at number 10 last season, I think he'd have ended up with 20 goals. So it wouldn't have been a bad solution. I think we've seen that Willy Gnonto can play more centrally. I think Laji Ramazani can play more centrally. Manor Solomon can play more centrally. So trying to find the right level of emerging talent who can come and have an immediate impact is really challenging. When the position we're in at the Championship is people need to come in and play for us immediately. We don't have a year for them to develop. We don't have 6 months for them to develop. We saw it with Jorginho Rutter. Georgie wasn't ready when he first came and joined us in the Premier League. He needed 6, 7, 8 months to transition into being a player. And at the moment, our recruitment strategy is not about players who are going to be able to develop for 4 or 5 years' time. They're players who are going to be able to contribute immediately, and that's why someone like Joe Rothwell, who's only coming on loan, is there because there is limited risk that he's not going to be able to perform at the right level in from day one.
I mean, you've identified both the players that you've said there in terms of Hamer and Buendia, probably not attainable. So why are we shopping in that market? If you think they're not attainable, why are we going in for them? Because I see the name Buendia and I think, that's probably unrealistic.
Well, it's because we want to be ambitious. So you have to ask the question. You have to try. You could have said the same about Manor Solomon. Manor Solomon had a lot of Premier League interest. He's definitely a Premier League player. He could play at top clubs all the way across Europe. And I think partly through our relationship with Tottenham Hotspur, we were able to get that deal done. Similarly with Joe Rodon. Joe Rodon had Premier League interest, but we wanted to make a case, and the fact that he'd been there for a season was a good reason to get him over the line. And that's the challenge in this window for us is to get the players who probably could play in the Premier League or probably could play in the top 5 league across Europe. And we have to find some kind of reason why they'll play for Leeds United, because that's the level you need to be at to be in the top 2 of the Championship.
Although Ipswich disproved that last year. You didn't need to necessarily be at that level. Sometimes it's just about having enough in the squad. Like you look at someone like Kiefer Moore, who came in for them on loan in the second half of the window. It's just about sometimes bolstering the squad, which I think is what you were maybe
warm bodies.
Getting at. Warm bodies that sometimes it might just be about numbers, perhaps, given the length of the season and the number of games. Yeah. And surely the job at hand is to get out of the Championship rather than worrying about what's next.
Well, I think I think that's exactly what we've done. We haven't bought any high. We haven't bought many high risk, high potential players. We've bought players who we think can deliver us for them this year across every position. And I think if there's a board in Daniel's office which has every position and the players who play at it. And in almost every position, we've got 2 players that I think would walk into every other Championship squad.
What do you say to Daniel Farke's comments? Because I got back to the idea of friction maybe between Farke and recruitment team. Went on record as saying that he told the recruitment team in January, prepare for the departures of Somerville and Rutter. That speaks to me, that suggests a degree of friction there or frustration on the part of Daniel Farke.
Yeah, well, I think Daniel's perspective is because Daniel is rightly focused on going up. He wants players who are going to absolutely deliver for him immediately. And so ideally, I think, if we could secure players like who were mentioned with us, linked with us, so a Jack Clark or a Jonathan Rowe, who have sort of proven championship performers, then it is easier for a manager to integrate those players into the team, and easier for them to get a guaranteed level of performance. But the reality is, Jack Clark went to the Premier League, and Jonathan Rowe went to League One, and it wasn't a question of finance that there's the issue there. It's the footballing ambitions of the players, and that's what we in pretty much every dialogue we have, and this is why some of our business was done later in the window. Every single player that we're talking to is hoping to get a move into the Premier League or one of the top 4 leagues across Europe. And the reality that Leeds United find themselves in, and all Championship clubs, is the Championship is the second choice.
It feels to me a little bit like we've been almost left holding the baby where the number 10 position's concerned. I don't know about you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it was a problem last year. It's been identified as a problem this year. For what it's worth, I do kind of agree on the Brendan Aronson thing. Having seen him now in the Championship, you can see how this might work. And I suppose I had written him off to a large extent because I didn't think he would come back at all this summer. And then I thought I was kind of almost anticipating a late move for him in the window as well. I just thought it wouldn't surprise me if a phone call arrives a day before the deadline and he ends up on his way again. But yeah, I think the early signs there are encouraging. But I just feel like if there was... I know it feels like there are surely an option, and I guess for looking ahead to the future, if we're not looking to for a development player there, it feels like it's a bit shit or bust this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Brendan is Brendan's attitude since he's come back is first class. He's really hard working. He's really earnest. He's desperate to make it work. He's desperate to win the fans back over. And we had lots of conversations with the recruitment team where we would analyse a player, and we analyse there are hundreds of players. So the process is really, really robust. There is data on hundreds and hundreds of players on every position. And then we have we've built a full scouting team since Victor's departure. Rebuilt the scouting team up, so they're watching hours and hours of video footage to try and find the right players. And they talked a lot about they just couldn't find a player that was going to be significantly better than Brendan Aronson. Brendan Aronson is a United States international. He's a player that we bought for over 20 million. He's a player that could probably play in any of the top 5 leagues across Europe. And we also watched him in pre-season, and Daniel and the scouting staff and the coaching staff are excited about what he might deliver. And I think if you look at his first 3 games, as he's working his way back into the team, should have scored 3 goals, and he scored 2. So I think there's lots to be excited about. And then there is just a reality of what type of player you can come to have who's going to come to prepare to be on the bench. And this is one of the other challenges we have in the window, is in lots of our key positions. If you're looking at loan players are not prepared to come because they want to be guaranteed a guaranteed name on the team sheet. So when you look at wingers, and we're trying to find wingers who are prepared to come to Leeds United, they look at Willie Gnonto and Dan James and say, well, I don't think I'm going to get a game. I don't think I'm going to get a game there. And I need game time. 2 of the other players, again, looking at the level we were looking at, McAtee at Man City, there was talk that he might be released all the way through the window, and then Pep decided to keep him. And then Carvalho, who again might have been able to go out on another loan. It might have been a Championship loan or a Premier League loan. We felt we were first in the queue if it was going to be in the Premier League, and he ended up being sold for £27 million to Brentford. So we are shopping in a to strengthen our team and to make it better. We have to shop at the highest level possible, and there is lots and lots of frustration.
In terms of frustration, I think we've found there's been a lot of that among the fan base over the summer. There's probably been a growth of mistrust in the club and the ownership over the course of the summer. Why do you think that's happened?
The reality is that getting relegated is really ugly, and not getting promoted again is uglier still. And if we fail to get promoted again this season, it gets uglier. So I think it's very difficult for the supporters to believe, even in a new ownership, when the general context around what's happening at the club feels negative. Nobody wants to sell Archie Gray. I mean, everybody at the club. I mean, genuinely, everybody at the club was devastated when we sold Archie Gray. He's been part of the club. People have seen him grown up. We know everyone knows his mum, his dad, obviously his uncle. His granddad. They're all. In fact, his granddad's come back onto our scouting staff on the south coast across the summer. But we have this fantastic relationship with the family, and of course, he's got a very talented younger brother. So nobody wants to work at Leeds United to sell Archie Gray. So it's very difficult for the fans to see anything positive from that scenario. Other than the fact we got a fantastic price for him, and those funds will help support the club and will be reinvested. Very difficult to see anything positive from that. Same from Georgie. We found Georgie a player that when we bought him, everybody hated, and then everybody fell in love with him. I think we had a really good chance of keeping him, but it was always going to be in the balance because the exit clause was so high, and to lose him was disappointing, and it was disappointing for him, and he was desperate to go and committed to go, but we've lost a real character and a really talented player that and I think he makes what's buying a season ticket worthwhile because of the flair that he had. So I think it's absolutely natural that across a period like that, the disappointment of the playoffs and then selling, a really exceptional young talent or two really exceptional young talents, the ownership are going to be questioned, and there's going to be some distrust and there's going to be some disappointment. But I really do think those things are a function of getting relegated and are the same for every team, and a function of the way British football's structured, rather than anything that the ownership have done. And actually, from what I've seen from the ownership is they continue to invest. They're putting tens of millions of pounds into the club to fund the club from the hangover from the Premier League. Nobody's taking a penny out of the club. They're investing in the infrastructure. They're investing in players. I think we'll be clearly we made some big sales, but we'll be the top spenders in the Championship. The wage bill will be way out of kilter with what the rest of the league spends. So I think there are lots of positives, but if I was a supporter, I would be disappointed and frustrated too.
Do you concede that maybe some of the messaging from the club has not helped the overall mood? Personally, I think it hasn't. Going back to maybe some of the things Parag Marate said in the wake of the playoff final defeat, and I would accept fully that I know why he said that. He was trying to rally the troops, circle the wagons, bolster everybody. But some of it has not looked great with the way that the window has played out and the loss of certain players, and like the sale of Archie, for example. So do you accept that the way that the summer has played out and some of the messaging hasn't really worked brilliantly together?
I think it's difficult because I think it's very difficult at the start of the summer to know exactly how the summer's going to play out. I think Parag has been very consistent, and that he'd back the team and he'd strengthen it and we'd strengthen the team. And but at the same time, I think there was a reality which you probably don't want to call out just after you've been you've failed in the playoffs, that some big players are going to have to leave. I think he did reference it, but you don't want to talk about that in detail. You don't want to talk about it in detail because you don't want to signal to the market that you're expecting to sell players or that you want to sell players. And I think in all the cases, the fact that it was unusual. In fact, it's not unusual. It's unique that a player of Archie's age from the Championship went for the value he went from, and we knew that there was a chance that it would happen, but there was every chance that it wouldn't happen, and in the end, it happened on the last day that the exit clause existed. I think we expected Creed to leave. He'd made an intention that he wanted to leave, and we thought he would get a move. But similarly with Georgie, his exit clause was at £40 million. That's a phenomenal amount for a player who's had one good season in the Championship. So I think it's very difficult for Parag to message those types of events when he wasn't sure that they were going to happen. And I don't think it would be very wise to message them to a marketplace, because you've got to think about how all your media is consumed and interpreted by your competitors and the clubs that want to buy your players. And what I think we've learned over the last few years is that making repeated comments during the transfer window just seems to act as a point to attract discontent, as a lightning rod for discontent. It's very difficult to say anything other than platitudes. I used to talk about through the transfer window in the programme notes. We used to talk about, we're not just getting warm bodies in. We're looking for the right players. We're looking for the right place. We're trying right time. We're trying to be patient. And it just frustrates players because it frustrates supporters because everybody's in this Sky Sports world of the deadline day clocks ticking down with 25 days to go and 15 minutes and 32 seconds. And there's this panic about, are we doing enough business? And the ownership and the board have decided that, we want to be judged on what we do and not what we talk about. And I think if we get to the end, we now look at the end of the window, and I think most fans, whilst there might have been some discontent during the window, actually say, with the exception of perhaps the departure of Georgie, and perhaps not replacing him with a kind of marquee number 10, we're in a pretty good position. Most of the fans I speak to think, would give the window a B+.
You mentioned there the Archie Gray exit clause that he had, and that being exercised on the final day. Was that motivated by PSR and almost to try and force someone's hand ahead of the next window, essentially, on that? So
that date is created so that it fits within the profit and sustainability rules, rather than being later in the window. So that it gives us the flexibility to either sell him after that date if we want to, but also if we need to pull revenue forward into the year that we've just been in, then it falls into that year.
And did we need to pull revenue forward?
Actually, in the end, we didn't. But if you look at our overall PSR picture, we did need to make sales across the window to hit that. And
is that the 3 year rather than the 1 year in specifically?
Yeah, right. Across the 3 year period. And I know you talk about it a lot on the show, so the supporters will understand it. Archie is very valuable from a PSR perspective because he's academy produced. So there is no amortization, there's no book value to him at all. So all of the revenue generated from the sale goes to hit the PSR target. And the PSR targets are it's really cruel, to come down from a world where you've got the gap from the 1 year 3 year rolling number to another 3 year rolling number, plus the fact you lose all your TV revenue, makes it really, really challenging to stay within those limits. And we have stayed within them, but it does necessitate, the only way you can do it is to sell players.
So if we didn't sell Archie, what would have been the plan B? Because it felt to me like you wanted to sell Somerville first. That didn't quite materialise quick enough, so somebody had to go.
So I think we to hit the targets without going into the specific figures, 2 sales would have done it across the period, but they didn't have to be timed for before June 30th. But two key sales, and they could have been some of our other players as well. So it could have been Pascal, or it could have been Willie, or it could have been Max Vober. There were other players in that mix as well. But the reality is when you get relegated, almost every single club needs to sell players to stay within the financial rules. Normally, it's a combination of the players wanting to leave, trying to meet the P&S rules, and normally needing cash as well. And in this situation, we didn't need cash. So we were fine from that perspective. I think under the previous ownership, we'd have had a cash problem as well. But we were enough funded by the 49ers not to need cash. But there was a PSR gap that we needed to close, and we had the issue of the players really wanting to leave.
Because that contract with that clause was signed in January under the current ownership. So there must have been one eye on, if we don't go up, we need to be able to sell Archie Gray. And I think maybe what fans or some fans might need to hear is that the club acknowledges that there is a PSR position, which to be addressed, which you have just done, and that there was always going to be somebody who was a sacrificial lamb for that cause, and Archie is the obvious one because, as you say, he's come through the academy, so he's pure profit from a PSR point of view.
Yeah, I mean, to plan yourself prudently, you have to be in a position where you're going to be able to sell players. I don't think there's any club, even Luton, who didn't have any expenditure when they or hardly any expenditure when they got promoted to the league, have had to sell Ross Barkley and Chidozie Ogbene as they've come back down. When Leicester came back down, and they've been in the Premier League for a long while, but they sold Maddison and Harvey Barnes and let Tielemans go as well. So it is a function of getting relegated that's going to happen, and it's about how you best manage it in a way which doesn't weaken the team significantly. And whilst everybody was again really disappointed to sell Archie for lots of reasons, actually there's very few players where you get that amount of PSR credit and don't weaken your team so as much as possible. So, we think we've been able to get a right back that will be able to perform for this season at the same level as Archie Gray for an eighth of the value that we generated for Archie Gray. But the plan wasn't necessarily to sell Archie Gray, but in his contract, we did create the flexibility that if we needed to do it, we had some control over the timing.
I think fans need to hear that, because I think there have been sort of twin narratives that have been allowed to coexist alongside each other. One is that the way that the sale was framed was exit clause, which leads to an implication that, well, he wanted out. But also, on the other side of this, we've heard lots. I mean, you spoke about last year about the need for a PSR reset on this show. If we don't go up this last season, there will need to be a PSR reset to some extent. And again, when Parag was briefing the local press after the playoff final, there are certain things that we need to do, and we will make sure we are fully compliant with P&S, as we always have been. There will be certain trade-offs that we have to make. And that was in relation to the question specifically about Archie Gray, which goes to show where this is going. So it feels like there have been these two things that have both been allowed to coexist. And I think fans probably need to hear that the club had to sell him from a PSR point of view. Yeah, well, the reality is we didn't have to sell him, but we had to make two big sales. That's a position. It didn't necessarily have to be Archie, and it didn't have to be on that timing. But the important thing to recognise on the exit clause, there is no exit clause that the club, or any club, I think, are wanting to put in a contract. There is no benefit to do that at all. That is driven by the player, and is normally becomes a condition of them signing the new contract. So with Archie Gray, he is one of the greatest English talents in the game at the moment. And when he's signing a new contract, he and his representatives are not prepared to be trapped in the Championship. They're just not. At that time, Archie Gray could have joined, when we did that new contract with Archie, and in the 2 years before, Archie Gray could have joined any club in the country. In fact, any club in Europe. Now, Real Madrid are interested in Archie Gray, Bayern Munich were interested in Archie Gray. So the way we were able to keep him was threefold. One, we gave him a really financially attractive offer, which matched what he'd have been offered in the Premier League. The second was that we leveraged the pathway into the first team that we felt he had at Leeds United, and the fact that he had a relationship with the club and wanted to be here, which is really important. But then we also had to construct a contract which he was happy with and wasn't going to block what he saw and what his representatives saw as his natural development. And if you don't do that, you simply lose them. And the other player slightly younger, but someone like Finlay Gorman, we matched the financial offer. We'd have come up with his contractual terms, but he didn't have the relationship with the club that Archie Gray had, and so he left. But, one of the things we're looking at the moment is we look at those academy players. We think, and I can't remember the precise number, we think there's 39 players playing in the Manchester United Academy or the Manchester City Academy who live in Yorkshire postcodes. So you have this hugely aggressive recruitment drive from two of the biggest clubs in world football right into the heartland, into our heartland, where we've developed so much great talent over the years. So we're not in a very strong position when it comes to negotiating with these players, and we have to cede to their demands and allow them to create a career path or sign contracts which are going to facilitate the career path that they want. And Archie Gray, who is a player who I think will ultimately play for Real Madrid or Bayern Munich, isn't going to be allowed to sign a contract by his representatives, which forces him to play for an extended period in the Championship for Leeds United, despite the fact that family loves Leeds United. No, I accept that, but I suppose people are going to want to know, are they pushing for an exit this summer, or was it convenient on all fronts? Like, are they coming to you and saying, we want out this summer? Because Archie, upon signing for Spurs, did an interview in which he said, at the start of the window, I had no designs on moving.
Yeah, but he also said in the same interview that he was absolutely delighted to go to Tottenham Hotspur, and it was an opportunity he couldn't turn down, and his whole family recommended that he made the move. I mean, Leeds United didn't approach any club to sell Archie Gray across the whole window. We didn't make, normally when you're trying to sell a player, you'd be offering that player around, you'd be speaking to the agent saying that you wanted that player to leave. We could have kept Archie Gray, but when you see, and I spent a day at Tottenham Hotspur's training ground with Daniel Levy and Archie and his dad putting the deal together. I mean, the deal, is absolutely life changing. And let me be clear, Archie and his dad handled the situation absolutely impeccably. they will always be great friends of the club. They couldn't have done anything more in terms of the way they handled it. But the opportunity to play, in the Premier League and ultimately in Europe for one of the 6 biggest clubs in the country on a multiple of the money that he was ever going to earn at Leeds United, you can't begrudge the player that decision. But, he wasn't forced out. We spoke to him on the final day. I spoke to him and Parag spoke to him. We said, Archie, if this doesn't feel right, just come back. Just come back and train. And, just come back and give us another year. But I don't begrudge him the decision at all. It's just the reality of the difference and the gap between the Premier League and the Championship, that when a player has that type of opportunity, they really have to take it.
How do we get ourselves into a position then, besides promotion, obviously, where this stops happening?
Fundamentally, if we want to have Premier League players playing for Leeds United, you need to be in the Premier League. It's as simple as that. There are, as I said before, over the past couple of seasons, we'd have had players who've done a great job for Leeds United, are very committed, are very loyal, but they would crawl over broken glass to go and play for Burnley in the Premier League or Ipswich in the Premier League, and that's really sad, and I hate it. And it's a function of the game and the gap between how the Premier League's perceived and the finances in the Premier League, and the only way to fix it is to get back in the Premier League. You
touched on the shortcomings of PSR, profit and sustainability, before. I think from a fan perspective, it's extremely, extremely frustrating to see that we are, and I suppose it's just the juvenile mindset of me as a football fan. I will say the same thing. It's not fair. What's going on in football is not fair. It feels like the system is broken. Everybody is trying to navigate ways around it, through it. Some of them maybe even cheating, I don't know. And it feels like we've, in particular, fallen victim to a lot of PSR breaches when we were in the bottom end of the Premier League and we got relegated, and then again at the top end of the Championship. So it is a juvenile question, but why are we trying so hard to be compliant when nobody else is? Yeah,
I don't think nobody else is, but you're right. It's fundamentally broken. I think the football in British football has lost track of what PSR is even trying to achieve. If you speak to clubs, there are some clubs which is about sustainability, and there's this sustainability issue, which candidly I don't think exists. I think we have one of the most sustainable industries in the world. We've got the same 100 protagonists playing at the top level of English football as we did 100 years ago, bar I think 1 or 2 exceptions. We have the greatest product in the Premier League, and that we have this fantastic strength in depth across the Championship with another 72 professional clubs, and then even more professional clubs in the National League. But there's this obsession with sustainability, where I think that good owners who are prepared to invest and can show that they've got funds and can commit funds for the long term shouldn't be prevented from investing in their clubs. And the 49ers are hugely frustrated about that, because they see the potential of Leeds United, and there are interests in the game who are very vested in maintaining the status quo. The top 6 don't want big clubs like Leeds United, along with Newcastle and Aston Villa. I think they're the only 3 clubs in the UK in England that can legitimately challenge the top 6. The top 6 don't want that challenge, so they want to support PSL rules. And when we finally agree a new deal for football, where a small amount of money will be cascaded down to the Championship, it'll probably return for stricter PSR rules, so that smaller clubs don't have the ability to come up into the Premier League and compete properly. The Premier League, I tell you, are delighted that the 3 teams who went up last season came straight back down, and they'll be delighted if the same happens again. They are accepting of a model where 3 teams can come up, have their day in the sun, but aren't really going to threaten the status quo. And that, for me, is the biggest issue with PSR, is that it's cementing the status quo, and it's meaning that ambitious clubs which have huge potential, like Leeds United, are going to find it increasingly hard to compete at the highest level.
That doesn't sound like a healthy industry to me. It sounds like a cartel.
Well, so again, it's the regulation that is coming in is going to make these rules stricter and tighter, not the opposite. I'm more for a freer market, where as long as your owners can show that they can forward fund investment into a club, they're allowed to. So for me, it should be a dilution of PSR rather than becoming more strict.
From the overall health of the game, though, it doesn't feel like a great model to have it set up so that clubs can lose as much money as they want constantly, because no one makes money in football. as a rule across the Championship, across the Premier League, most teams lose money, and most owners at some point don't want to lose money. The 49ers aren't here to chuck £200 million in the bin every year buying players. At some point they want a return on that, and how they get a return on that is a bit unknown at this stage, truth be told, because the return at the moment is you sell to someone else who has more money than you, but at some point that has to end.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the growth in the value of, and I'll use the word, I appreciate it doesn't apply to the UK, but American sports franchises, they continue to grow. And I can talk about when I was at Arsenal, and Stan Kroenke had the full suite of American sports franchises under his ownership stable, and he looked at Arsenal and couldn't understand why Arsenal was valued at a third of what the Denver Nuggets were valued at. So we still see it undervalued. It's a global game. But I think from Leeds United's perspective, we have a fantastic fan base, we have a fantastic opportunity around the stadium, and I think rules that force you to sell one of your best young homegrown talents to a bigger club, who are then going to be able to outcompete you when you do finally get promoted, can't make sense. And I think there needs to be a drive towards freer competition so that Leeds can get back to competing at the highest level. But at the moment, when we get promoted, and I think we will get promoted this year, next season will be hugely challenging, because the churn that we will need in our squad is going to be so significant to be able to compete that. And this is where the debate happens. So in the Championship, everybody, if you go to a Championship owners meeting, everybody's frustrated about parachute payments, because they say 2 out of 3 teams that get promoted every year have parachute payments, and they say it's an unfair construct. And to an extent, that's true. But it's equally unfair in the Premier League, because you have these clubs who have had years and years of Premier League revenue, built a Premier League squad over those years, and it makes it virtually impossible now for smaller teams to come up and compete meaningfully. And ultimately, if people are going to invest in Championship clubs, they have to have the confidence that they're going to be able to go into the Premier League and give it a fair crack. And I think that's increasingly diminishing.
Could have a regulator that could oversee these sort of things, couldn't you? Because I don't necessarily trust the free market aspect of this either.
Yeah, well, there's a great.
Again, I know you're a fan. We touched on this year after year, but
there's a great political debate. But look at regulation in the energy industry and the 48 energy companies that went bust during COVID and the increase in energy prices. I'm not sure regulation is the solution.
But equally, is the Saudi state spending freely in a form of sports washing? Is that healthy as well?
Do you think a regulator would have stopped the Saudi state enter football? They didn't. The Saudis' entry into football was blessed by the British government because of the amount of arms trade we do with Saudi. That's the issue. It's not whether they have a regulator in the middle of it or not. And I just think having an instrument of government trying to run one of the most successful products that England exports and has built seems like a bad idea to me in terms of how well the government run everything else. But I do completely accept that the game needs significant reform. Everybody knows it needs significant reform. It's not working. I just question whether the government are the best people to reform it.
I mean, there are clearly 2 ways you go on this. Though you say regulation hasn't worked, therefore you get rid of regulation, or you say you just get someone to do a good job of it is the option. And I equally am wary of the free market, because the free market allows at some point the ladder to be completely kicked away from the Championship. The Premier League to see them decide between themselves. Actually, we kind of like it up here. We like the part of the reason American sports franchises are able to grow revenue is that they know they're not going to get relegated.
Yeah, it's a closed shop, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a guarantee of income year on year. What would be to stop in an unregulated environment? What would be to stop the Premier League going, actually, we quite like this. We're just going to have it as just these 20 teams.
Interestingly, what stopped it, and it's happened, was the supporters stopped it. The Super League was formed. These clubs went away. They handed in their notice to the Premier League effectively and went and joined the Super League. And it wasn't stopped by government. It was stopped by supporters. So it's, for me, that is the greatest example of self-regulation. Actually the people who enjoy and love and invest in the game, they were the people who stopped the Super League. The government were asleep at the wheel. They didn't have anything to do with it. So, I mean, I don't know whether I know. In fact, I definitely don't know the right answer. I know it needs change. I think change is coming. It's coming in the form of the regulator, and what the clubs need to do and the leagues need to do is to work with the regulator to get the best independent regulation possible. And that's what's happening now. So I mean, the sort of ship sailed in terms of the debate, and we just now need to move forward into a way where, and for me, I view everything through the lens of Leeds United. I want an environment where Leeds United can compete freely, and we succeed in our merit, and we're not prevented from growing and developing our potential by regulation.
Another facet to this argument, though, is Aston Villa's ticket prices, which we saw released in the last week or two, and what unchecked owners can do to their fan bases. There's enough consternation at Leeds about £50 tickets, I think, which I think they're bordering on unjustifiable for the Championship for sitting in the worst stand in the ground. Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at ticket prices and index it against inflation over the last 20 to 30 years, the increases are not significantly above inflation. So I think, we're now at the age where, I'm certainly at the age where everything just seems expensive, and it does feel like a lot. But I don't think they've gone. If you take out all the premium seats, then the GA seats have gone broadly, I think, across the football industry in line with inflation. What about young people? Young people, and being asked to fork out £50 for a ticket to watch Championship football. I mean, and they're the future of the fan base. It's our pricing policy for our young supporters is fantastic. I think for our youngest supporters, it's the season ticket works out £6 or £7 a game. So I think it represents fantastic value. I mean, clearly it needs owners who have a relationship with the fan base and a desire. And this is where I think the 49ers have been great. You could look at all the modelling in the world, and you could look at increasing the prices of Leeds United tickets because we've got 22,000 people on the season ticket waiting list, and actually, season ticket prices have increased. I think twice in the last 10 years. So actually, have increased very very modestly. Just on the season ticket waiting list, people are still not aware where they are in that queue. Is there any plan to let people know? So I think the reality is that only it's slightly more than a handful come available every year. So really, there's limited churn. The opportunity for people on the season ticket waiting list to get a seat is going to be when the new stand's built, and then we can give them visibility. But in the interim, I think it was in the low 30s the number of seats that churned and were resold this. But there's a significant difference though between knowing whether you are number 30 on the list and number 22,000 on the list. People have got no idea. Yeah, and the rationale behind it is, and it was something that we had at Arsenal, is when you go out to the season ticket waiting list and you have a number of seats, we go out to a whole raft of people in one go, because lots of people don't want them anymore. Lots of people have fallen out of love with the game. The number of seats that churn doesn't always link into the number of seats that become available. So it's very difficult to be completely transparent on where you're going to be. But as soon as you sort of say to people, you are 27th, then all you do is you create a whole load of dialogue with that supporter about, why they didn't get a season ticket, why somebody who's 35th was offered a season ticket, because ultimately we offer them in batches when they come out. So it's not something we get a lot of criticism about. I know, but you've charged for it. So I think people kind of want to know where they are. If people paid to be on that list, it might be useful, just even if you let them know, are you in the top 50? Yeah, okay, we can have a look at that. Top 100, or are you 22,000? Yeah, I mean, it's not a kind of vehement. It's not a vehement policy. I think what it is from the ticket officers, they don't like getting into huge dialogues with people over specific numbers and why did someone get one and not what, and it might be because they've taken one in a different part of the ground which wasn't available to them. So, but I think telling people broadly where they are. But what the message broadly is at the moment is, if we keep playing the way we're playing until we get a new stand, then your place on the season ticket waiting list is pretty much irrelevant till the new stand arrives.
When the mythical new stand does arrive, I know we've been kind of waiting for it for about 30 years at Leeds.
Yeah.
Do you envisage there'll be many normal season tickets in there? Because my reading of it is that it'll probably be quite heavily corporate in there, and from a match day income point of view, you make an awful lot of money from selling match by match tickets and not all that much from season tickets, like you were saying about kind of pegging things to inflation. If you can create a corporate ticket that has even a very low level of corporate hospitality attached to it and charge £90 for it, there is more incentive to do that than there is to allow someone in for £500 on a season ticket.
Well, there's no hiding from the fact that increasing the number of premium seats will be part of the plan, and that's why all of the planning applications that are currently underway are for the West Stand and the North Stand. And the vision at the moment is the North Stand wouldn't have any hospitality in it at all, and the West Stand would have an increase in hospitality to fund. Ultimately, to fund, you cannot fund a stadium build just on GA seats. You need premium seats in there, and I think there'll be a bigger spread of premium seats. So one of the things that Leeds United doesn't have very many of, it's sort of got the Bremner. I think is the only is the level is sort of a base level of, I think in industry terms it's known as premium GA. But it's effectively a GA seat, which has
GA being general admission.
General admission, sorry, which has an element of hospitality on it, but actually isn't a huge step up for supporters. And at both West Ham and Arsenal, we found lots and lots of existing season ticket holders were prepared to step up into premium general admission to get a better located seat and access to a bar.
So what extent of the new stand will be given over to that level of thing then, do we know? And do we, I mean, you've spoken before about maybe getting up towards 55,000 for the overall capacity. Can you start to flesh that out a little bit? Because these are questions that kind of keep rolling forward with talk of the stadium.
So I think we are very close to... So the good news about the stadium is for the first time in the 6.5 years or 7 years that I've been involved in the club, I think we've got some real traction behind the stadium. So the 49ers have committed, it's a multi-million-pound sum to... You
nearly said a number then.
I nearly said a number, exactly. But then you said I should have spent it on a number of 10 instead. They spent a multi-million-pound sum on putting together a project team which has environmentalists, transport planners, the design team, the structural engineers, the mechanical engineers. That team now is meeting 2 or 3 times a week with a view to submitting the planning application. There's going to be an announcement very shortly about that, and within that you'll get a degree of granularity in the plans around stadium capacity. I think at the moment it's looking like it's going to be 53,000. That's the most economic number. Within that, you'll also get a sense of the broad split between, which hasn't been decided yet, between GA and hospitality seats. But there'll be a significant GA increase. But there will also be an increase in premium seats on that side as well, because the West Stand doesn't really have any workable hospitality as it stands.
Just in terms of regulator issues, where do we stand on football clubs being renamed?
It's not going to happen.
I know Parag's gone on record and said absolutely not, and obviously I'm angling towards Red Bull here because this was another thing that contributed, I think, towards ill feeling over the summer, is that you've let in a company that obviously, like, commercially huge, is going to bring money in, but it cannibalizes football clubs. Historically, it cannibalizes football clubs, and that will get... I mean, some people might welcome it, some people might happily wave through RB Leeds if it was to ever happen, but personally, I think that'd be the line for me.
Yeah.
And I think people probably need reassurance. And more to the point, you can sit here and say it, Parag can say it, but what if they get their 100% takeover? Why should we believe them, not you?
Yeah, so I mean, all I can say is that it's never been a consideration in terms of, it's never been raised by them. It's never been anything that's been offered. Parag has been adamant, and I'm with him on this, that it's not going to happen. I think to give the fans some kind of reassurance in the direction of travel, I think over the last couple of weeks you'll have seen that Red Bull have announced some more traditional sponsorship deals, and I don't want to announce. I think they're going to end up with 6 clubs. So I don't want to tell you the 2 that they've announced in case I tell you the ones that they're due to announce. But they're going to end up with 5 or 6 partnerships, which are going to be more traditional sponsorship partnerships. And we're very proud that they chose Leeds United to be the first of those, because this is, although it has an ownership stake in it, this is about driving the brand awareness through football in a market that they haven't been in historically. The values of the deal are absolutely transformational from a commercial perspective. So this is not something that and again, we're not going to publish the values, but they are, a multiple of what we'd have expected otherwise. It's a really high level of commitment. They're a fantastic brand who are very active in the sports space. So it's already raised the bar for our other partners and how aspirational we are to other partners. So I understand the fans' concerns about what's happened elsewhere. It's very difficult to to give them absolute certainty that it's never going to happen again. But it is not the 49ers plan. It's not the 49ers plan to sell to Red Bull. It's not Red Bull's plan to buy Leeds United. It is by and large a sponsorship deal which has an equity element to it, and I think it's going to be one of the pillars which is going to frame our commercial success, which will ultimately frame our footballing success. So I think it's, my perspective will be in 4 to 5 years' time, everyone will look back on the Red Bull deal and they'll see from a commercial perspective, it was the catalyst for the commercial growth which has fueled Leeds United being a top 10 Premier League side. If
there's not a potential for future ownership, why we believe it's 10%? Why have it? What's the point?
Lots of people like they want to be involved. They think they can have. We have a very diverse and eclectic range of stakeholders who've all got minority stakes. They all think they can bring something to the table. Our football guys have already built relationships with the Red Bull team. They have a network of clubs, and
you saw them in court, of course.
I think we're old friends, so we go back a long way. So I think the 49ers see them as another partner who can bring more to the table other than just the financial element and the brand exposure element. So I think it's ultimately something that will be viewed positively.
Can you see why it's problematic though? Because Red Bull in the past have been incredibly skillful in negotiating the rules to get themselves Red Bull Leipzig, for example. They weren't allowed to change the name, so they become Rasenballsport. They have taken over a club in Austria Salzburg who had kit colours and traditions and a crest, and they've completely stripped it all away.
And bragged about it as well.
So the fact that they are now part of our ownership, it does inevitably, and I think correctly, raise enormous red flags.
I think all the questions that have been asked are completely fair, and I don't think Parag or the ownership would shy away from them. But they can only answer them in the way that we found it. This has not been, this has never been part of the 49ers plans. The 49ers want to maintain majority ownership. They want to take the club back into being, we sort of internally don't talk about, gate crashing the top 6, but I think certainly turning the top 6 into the top 8 is a long-term objective that we can't get impatient about, but it's something that, as I said, only 2 or 3 clubs can achieve, and they see Red Bull supporting that process rather than them taking any kind of more formal ownership stake or larger ownership stake or any more day-to-day control. So I can only say as I've seen it, but I understand the fans' concerns, and I understand the reality is that lots of sports sponsorship sits uneasily with supporters groups and potentially quite rightly. But whether you can have whether it's a beer partner or an energy drinks partner or a betting partner, there are all challenges around all those categories. And I think we have a partner who's committed to the club for the right reasons, and I think it's going to be part of everything that's going to be successful moving forward.
On a personal level, if they were to take over and name changes were being discussed, would you stick around for that, or would that be a point?
Yeah. So if you want a level of kind of personal commitment, I could categorically say I wouldn't be part of Leeds United if it's changing its name.
What about Luton? If it suddenly they rock up and it's Royal Bedfordshire Luton, and
it's again same with Luton. That would be, although if they could get Luton back in the Premier League, maybe we might be more flexible there. But for me, the whole name changing, as a sort of Luton Town fan, we have MK Dons on our doorstep. I think the game, certainly the English game, those are things that just wouldn't be allowed. They wouldn't be allowed to happen. The 49ers wouldn't allow them to happen, and they certainly won't happen on my watch.
I would say German football fans would have said the same of Leipzig, though, because they have rules about ownership, and it's what the country with probably the strongest fan culture in Europe. You would say they are quite hard line on these things, and yet there they are existing and getting in the Champions League places.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, what's happened in Germany is clear, but I just can't see it happening. I just can't see it happening to Leeds United. And all I can say is all of the meetings we've had with Red Bull, this has never even been a topic of consideration. It's been about how they can engage the fan base. It's about how they can drive their brand awareness. It's a very, very, classic sponsorship deal, but it has the element of them being able to assist on the football side. And I think we will see some, not necessarily in style of play, but I think we will see some synergies that the club can benefit from in the medium term on the football side.
Just returning to the messaging over the summer, and perhaps why some of it rubbed people up the wrong way. When Parag Marate commented on the Red Bull deal, he said it could be the difference between saving a player from being sold or signing a player. I think eventually that didn't look great. And it may, again, I can take it in isolation and say, I know why he said that, because it adds money to the bottom line. However, following that, we lost our three best players.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the challenge on relegation is you have this hangover of enormous wage bill. And in our case, which was particularly sort of acute, was we had this huge balance that we were owed to transfer creditors. And that was because in the last years of the previous ownership, we bought players with extended payment terms. And ultimately, the 49ers are having to pick up that, are now having to pick up the tab for some of those purchases. And obviously those purchases didn't work out. So the financial commitment that the 49ers have made is huge. And that commitment is helping us to retain lots of the players that we have retained. So we turned down offers for Willy Gnonto that any other championship club categorically would have accepted. We turned down offers for 4 or 5 other players, all in excess of 10 million. That again, most championship clubs would have been forced to sell, but we retained the squad. Ilan Meslier is not a championship player. Pascal Struijk is not a championship player. Ethan Ampadu is not a championship player. And all those players were retained because of the way that the 49ers have structured their investment with multiple stakeholders to create an environment where we can sustain the highest wage bill I think that the championship's ever seen, and where we're not forced to sell players that other championship clubs would have had to sell. And that hopefully will give us the foundation to be the strongest team in the championship this season.
The figure in the accounts, so we're always a year out of date with the accounts, but it was 190 million going into this last season, wasn't it, owed to transfer creditors? And we should say there's a difference between cash that's owed and PSR. They are two related but slightly different beasts. Is that the sins of the past that Daniel Farke was talking about? And how soon will we be free of the sins of the past?
Yeah, so I think if there were 8 deadly sins rather than 7, then the 8th is getting relegated. Relegation is really challenging, because what it means you haven't got it right on the pitch. So your players haven't performed in the way that you expected them to, which means you probably bought them for more and they're now worth less. That problem is exacerbated if you've been aggressive, as we were. So Luton have chosen a different model where they didn't spend very much on promotion. They've only had to sell 2 players as they've come back down. But because of our fantastic season where we finished 9th, and the previous owner committed significantly in transfers across the long term, because we felt we could run into, we felt we could have a team which was going to compete regularly in the top half of the Premier League. And you've got to remember, there is a lot of the Premier League payments are merit based. So it's £3 million a position. So if you finish 10th rather than in the bottom 3, you're £30 million. You're £30 million up. So that you're highly incentivized to perform well. You're also there, and by the way, there are no merit payments in the Championship at all. In fact, if you get into playoffs, you have to split your gate revenue with all the other clubs when you get into the playoffs. There's also £1 million for every time you're on TV. The facilities fee in the Championship, I can't even remember what it is now, but it's like, instead of being £1 million every time you're selected to play, I think it's £30,000. And in the Premier League, we were being selected 21, 22, 23 times, alongside some of the top 6 clubs, because so much as the demand for watching Leeds matches. So that revenue hit is so significant, and then you're left with these players who haven't performed at the level that you wanted them to, and that hangover lasts the length of those players' contracts. Now, I think we were able to get out of it in a relatively measured way. So we sold Sinistera and we sold Tyler Adams, and the sales that we made, I know that the loan clauses won't light, but we saved tens of millions of pounds in salaries from the loan clauses, and that created a team that last season was able to compete really well. And ultimately, we probably missed by the width of a crossbar on Dan James' shot at Wembley. So I think we did a reasonably good job at building a team that we could fund, was within the P&S rules, and could also compete at the highest level. As you said it early on, but 90 points would have normally got us promoted. I think we've done a reasonable job this year in having another year where the PSR constraints get even tighter, because we have another year of the lower loss threshold, plus we have smaller parachute payments. But we've managed to maintain a squad with some sales, and no one likes selling players. And I know for supporters, it's rubbish to hear, well, this was good business, or it was, it means nothing because they're not playing for you anymore. So no one cares whether it's good business or not. But the revenues that we've generated are the revenues which are enabling to support the team that we've got currently on the pitch. So it's an unfortunate fact of the construct of the leagues. But I think the fact that we feel we've got as good a chance of going up this season as we had last season is a measure of the fact that the 49ers have picked up that credit card bill from the previous ownership, continued to back Daniel, continued to keep the squad together, and convinced a squad of players that another season of playing football in the Championship for Leeds United is the right thing for their careers.
Now we're another year further down the line. I think we touched on this last year a little bit, but how do you reflect on your own role in that, the Klarna years, effectively, where we're backloading all these transfer deals that are now becoming really problematic because we came down and the revenues obviously plummet as a result of that? Is there not part of you, like, in that room saying we shouldn't be doing this?
I think I don't think you. I would never apologise for being overly ambitious for Leeds United. I think Leeds United should be in the top echelons of English football, and that was very much our aim. You do have to overcommit to get there, and so strategically, I don't think I would regret the fact that we had that drive to try and consolidate a position in the top 10. But what I would regret is I think we made some technical decisions, and they were club decisions across the club, where we got recruitment wrong. And I think a club like Leeds United, because of the fan base, because of the commercial potential it has, shouldn't be getting relegated when it got promoted. We worked really, really hard to get promoted, and we should have just sustained that position. And I think, if anything, we some of the recruitment was just a little too speculative, and it could have been a little bit more. It could have been a little bit more risk averse, and perhaps the model. It's a hard model to perform, but we've talked about it on this show before. I think Brighton in their first 3 seasons didn't. The first 3 seasons in the Premier League, everyone looks at them now as this wonderful model, and they're buying exciting Ecuadorians and trading players. But I think in their first 3 seasons,
you mentioned this last year. I remember you saying
they didn't win more than 9 games, and they finished 17th, and 15th. And so I think there's probably, and I think this is something we'd need to consider when we get promoted again, there is probably a period where you want to focus more on consolidation than kind of shooting from the stars, and you build that platform. And if you speak to Steve Parish at Crystal Palace, I think they've done that very well, where they have consolidated a position where Crystal Palace don't wake up at the start of every season terrified about relegation. And then they can actually go and buy some players like Eze and Elise and Gay that they can then go and trade. But they do it off a firm base rather than perhaps getting ahead of themselves in terms of how the trading model is going to work.
So we need to do it for you, Glenn Murray years. That's what you're saying.
Glenn Murray is exactly the player I use with our recruitment team.
Nice contemporary reference for everyone.
Yeah, no,
he's relatively contemporary.
Just a player who's just going to go and grind it out, and I think that is there is a desire to have a pipeline of young talent that you're going to be able to sell for more, and that's going to fund the model. But that market's hugely competitive, and I think you'll have seen that in our recruitment this year. Is that we could have taken more risks. Our recruitment team did a fantastic job. They have got players across Europe, which I think are really, really high potential. We'll see in 4 or 5 years' time will be probably top talent that it would be great to have at Leeds. But at the moment, our objective is not to trade players. It's to get promoted. And so you need players who are going to come on and have an immediate impact. And that's why so much time was spent on someone like Largi Ramazani to make sure that we were buying him at the right point of the curve. And all the data and all the scouting reports suggest that this is a player who has scored 5 or 6 goals a season historically, but has the ability to score 15 because they're at that sort of inflection point in their career. But that's as much risk as we were prepared to take, rather than going for even younger players or even more obscure players who might be good but might not be.
Do you think maybe the team was a bit too young last year? Just going back to that, it just occurred to me then when you're talking about not buying young players, is that something that's been identified internally, that maybe a little bit more experience is needed? Yeah,
I mean, if you look at the recruitment, I think most of the recruitment, and this has been a deliberate strategy, I think most players fall between the ages of 24 and 26. So Daniel talked a lot about the team being young last season, and they were, and I'm not suggesting that this necessarily happened, but when the rubber hits the road and things get, the pressure's on, I think it's, most managers would agree that it's better to have a few old heads who've been there and done it. And if they're not playing, then at least in and around the dressing room. And we were in a position at the end of the season where we were expecting, 3 to 4 20-year-olds to really drive us towards promotion. And I think this season you'll see that the average age of the team that we field match on match will be 3 to 4 years higher, and that's deliberate.
You just mentioned the words deliberate strategy there, and it reminded me of the statement that was on the website when Manor Solomon signed. There's been a vague hint of jilted teenager about some of this stuff over the course of the summer. Do you think that the club has felt the external pressure being applied by the fans, and that's reflected in things like that? What did we say? So it was the deliberate strategy of remaining patient in the transfer window has paid dividends, with the club able to act quickly to secure the services of a player who only became available in recent days. It felt a tiny bit catty, did that?
I'm not sure it was a deliberately catty.
Were they your words? Because you just said the words deliberate strategy, and I was just...
Well, I think all strategy should be deliberate rather than accidental. But I don't know, not my words, but I mean, I think definitely we feel the pressure. Everybody is working really, really hard. There's 10 of us stuck in a room watching videos of players and scouting reports and data, and we know that the fans want stuff to happen quickly. We're also very conscious of the fact that we got off to a slow start last season, and I think Parag mentioned he didn't want to have that similarly slow start this season. But it is a function of where we sit in the pecking order. So, when Leeds were in the Premier League, I think we probably were in the top 15 clubs that people would want to join globally, because you've basically got the sort of big 5 in Europe and then the top 10 in the Premier League. And Leeds are, we are in that top 15 in terms of how aspirational we are for a player to join. When you drop into the Championship, you've got the 20 clubs in the Premier League and the 20 clubs in the top 4 leagues across Europe who are all ahead of you in the pecking order. So you've suddenly become the 102nd, 103rd most attractive club to join. And that's why the business gets done increasingly at the end of the window, because you are just waiting on those players to, and I know this doesn't sound particularly romantic in terms of a player joining, but in terms of all of them to exhaust all their other options before Leeds then become the best option in the Championship, or potentially against a Bundesliga 2 club or a Serie B club. And so I think definitely there is, we don't work in a vacuum. Some people listen to your show, they read they read the stuff online, and we knew there was a level of frustration. So I mean, we knew we were going to have to wait, and we knew some of the business would be done late. But I also think if you compare us to last season, whilst the result at West Brom, I think the performance at West Brom was disappointing. We know we win that game against Portsmouth 99 times out of 100. If we win that game, I think everybody at the club would take a point away at West Brom, point more than we got last season. And then we've won the other 2 with the lowest expected goals against us in, I think, all of the league. And so I think we got off to a pretty good start. And that was one of the plans, was to be ready from day one. And it wasn't ideal that Georgie left on the last day, and that was something we had to try and react to. But by and large, I think when we lined up against Portsmouth, I felt we were in a much better place than we'd been a season before.
Do you think Leeds fans will ever be happy?
The funny thing is the Leeds fans that you meet. I mean, I just think online. I mean, I don't spend any time online at all because it's just so.
It's for the best.
It's just so, yeah, no, exactly. Well, I don't. I get enough feedback as it is without going online to seek it. But
feedback.
The supporters that I meet, generally, if you take out the sort of social media piece, are really positive. So after the trip to Wembley, a few of our members of staff, we got a coach back, and we stopped at a KFC on the services on the M1. And I was pretty pretty down about things, and every single fan came over and said, we'll go again next season. Great year, great day out. I mean, everyone was disappointed. They were should have been at the pits of the despair, but actually there was a whole load of positivity about it. When I meet fans in and around the ground, the supporters advisory board that I work with, the supporters groups that we work with, I think there's generally a belief that certainly from 7 or 8 years ago, we didn't sell the East Upper Tier. We were getting crowds of 18 or 19,000. We were perennially in finishing mid-table. In the last 5 or 6 years, we've been in the Premier League for 3 of them. We've been in 2 lots of playoffs. We've been promoted once. Finished 9th.
Relegated as well.
There's a relegation in there as well. Yeah. It's not on the CV, that one. But I think I think there's a general feeling that and I talk about this a lot, but that the trajectory of the club is moving in the right direction. I think we have. I know it's a bit difficult, isn't it? Because chief exec comes on and tells everyone how great his employers are, but we have stability at ownership level that we really haven't had. I think in the last 20 years, we've got people who have got funding for the long term. They are passionate about the club. Parag is flying over again on Saturday. Peter Lowy attends almost every single game. Gene and Andrew, who are sort of they're on the board, but they really don't really want any profile. But they are if you want anything from owners, you want them to have money. You want them to be emotionally invested. And if you want to be really greedy, they should have some knowledge of what they're doing as well. And we have all three. We have all 3 things. So Gene is based in Miami, and yet he'll ring me up at 3:00 in the morning Miami time, to celebrate the fact that Ipswich have let in a last minute goal to Cardiff away in a game which didn't even involve us. So I think we've got some really some long term owners. There's a good plan. The direction of the stadium is of the stadium redevelopment. There really will finally be some traction, and I'm sick of talking about it. And I know I've lost any credibility in talking about it before something happens. But I think there'll be an announcement which will really give fans belief that's going to happen. So I go into this season just feeling really positive, and I think a few more victories, and I think that the fans will share that positivity too. Yeah,
I think even if we were 10 points clear with 4 games to go, no one's going to be happy or settled, are they? It's just the nature of this club.
Yeah, we are. There is a level of a weight of expectation on this club, which I think is a double-edged sword. So I think it's the fuel that fires everybody at the club. It's the reason why the 49ers are the owners. It's the reason why Daniel Farke came to be a manager here. It's the reason why we recruit most of our players, because we have this fantastic heritage, this fantastic legacy. Everyone knows the size of the club. Everyone knows the potential. But the double edge of that is that we have this weight of expectation that teams like Luton and Brentford and Brighton don't have. And I think it's certainly easier to operate on occasions without that weight of expectation. But I'd much prefer to have the potential of Leeds United than the lack of expectation that Brentford have.
So does things does it calm down a little bit if you said when before? So I'll hold you to that when we go back up. That maybe things settle down for a little bit when we get back there. But I feel like it would immediately transmit into anxiety about staying up thereafter, and it's never going to be calm, is it?
No. I mean I don't and I think this is why one of the things about we've sort of felt is when you've got a club which is as crazy as Leeds United, you need calmness at the centre of it. Daniel is really calm, Parag is really calm. I think I'm calm because the environment outside is challenging, and I think when we get promoted, it'll be worse than it is now. At the moment, I think there is genuinely some optimism because people are going into this season thinking. I mean, for the record, I want Leeds United to be in the Premier League, and that's what I wake up every morning and think about. But I love the Champo.
But you win games, don't you? But the problem is it's not sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable, and we do need to go up. But I think the level of optimism now is higher than it will be, and I know that when we get to the Premier League, we'll have a moment of celebration, and then everybody will be dissecting this fixture list and going, where do these 9 wins come from? And it's miserable. And I didn't go very often last season, but I was able to take my son to Luton to watch them in the Premier League, which I never thought I'd do. So I supported them in the old Premier League, but I never thought I'd get the opportunity to do that. And it was exciting. We saw Arsenal and Liverpool, and then it was miserable because we just we just got soundly beaten. I'm
waiting for that to kick in on the Ipswich curve, by the way. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and it will do. They'll have a nice day out at Anfield, and then they realise it's not very much fun. So we know that when we get promoted, the challenge is massive, because we're going to need to quickly establish ourselves, and we're going to need to be robust, and we're going to need to, it's very, very difficult to plan anything commercially from a football perspective if you're constantly looking over your shoulder about being relegated. So you want to put yourself in that position where you start every season thinking, we're going to finish 13th or 10th rather than we're going to finish 17th or 18th. And that's going to be the key. And so there's nobody at the club is under any illusions that getting promotion solves anything other than bringing on the next challenge.
Speaking from a personal perspective, and I'll throw this one at you first, Michael, do you think that maybe this ownership will be judged primarily and more comprehensively if and when we do get back up? It's about how they attack the Premier League rather than what we're doing now, because I think people understand the PSR constraints. It's a bit of a mess down here, but we should hopefully give ourselves a good chance of getting out of here. It's what comes next. Given the way that you've talked up the ownership as well.
It's a strange one, though, because last time we went up, it was under Bielsa. It was a whole new and exciting thing. It was also during the COVID years, and we did really well. Like, if we went up this year, we wouldn't expect to finish in the top half. It's not going to be on anyone's plan. It will be, let's finish 17th or above, and that's absolutely fine.
17th, no thank you.
But it'd be a success. It would be at boardroom level, everyone would go, great stuff. We go again next year. We've done the first bit. That's the first year out of the way. So I suppose the stuff that could be immediately done would be stadium things, because that was always, well, if we go up and then we're sustained in the Premier League for a few years, that'll start getting going, and it never did.
Signs of progress.
Yeah, and then I suppose it felt like as well we went up last time without necessarily enough of a support system in place as well. As you were talking about recruitment, it felt like, I'm aware there was more going on in the background, but it felt like it was Victor Orta, and that was essentially it. There was not, the commercial operation wasn't quite of Premier League standard, you would have to say as well, like in terms of the availabilities of kits and things and the general offering there. So it needs to be, the club as a whole, I think, needs to be seen to grow to allow for the football team to expand, which I think didn't happen last time. And it became clear that once you took Bielsa out of it, it was actually a bit of a shell in the background.
So I think to answer your question, the 49ers will definitely view the way they will expect the way to be judged as how this club performs in the Premier League. That's their vision. That's what they want to be judged against. At the same time, I don't think we should underestimate the challenges of getting promoted. It's a really hard thing. It's a really hard thing to do, and we're going to have to be, we're going to have to do everything right to achieve our first objective. And there's significant hurdles to overcome to get there. I do think that when we get to the Premier League, you will be able to see much more structural change, which makes the club feel like it's going to come. It is becoming a Premier League club, and that's about the owners having, Andre was doing this on his own. This is a consortium of owners who have deep pockets, who have fantastic resources. With Gene and Andrew and Peter, we have some of the best. We have world-class property development, talent. We have the 49ers who run one of the biggest sports franchises in world sport. Like it or not, we have Red Bull, who have a network of football clubs. So we are much more set up for success. And definitely the 49ers will and they are already investing in the infrastructure. And one of the frustrating things about PSR is that you can't even invest in a lot of the things you can't invest in off the pitch, because they count against PSR. So some of them don't. So academy expenditure doesn't. Some of the infrastructure stuff doesn't. But if you want to hire a new marketing manager, it does. That dents your ability or more hospitality staff. That dents your ability to be able to compete on the pitch. So I think those pillars of being a Premier League entity will become very visible very, very quickly. But I wouldn't diminish the challenges of, in the Premier League, you are one managerial appointment or 3 signings in your first season away from failure.
I thought you were going to say 3 managerial appointments then, given the way our last season panned out.
Yeah, we tried that, didn't we? That was great.
So it's that fragility exists, and it doesn't matter if you've got stadium plans. It doesn't. It will. We will have. I think we'll have and we already have a more well constructed, comprehensive, analytically based recruitment process. But when you can only make 3 or 4 bets, which you can make, you look at Ipswich and that fantastic team, that fantastic momentum that they've generated, and it felt a little bit to me like they were saying, they gave everybody a day out at Liverpool of the old team, and then this new team has come in because they've realised that churn of squad's is going to be significant. So clearly, we think we've got a number of players in our squad at the moment who can perform well in the Premier League. But how we manage that churn is going to be the challenge that all clubs faced, and the 3 teams that went up last year all failed.
Yellow shirts do sell, after all. Turns out. Who told you that?
So, I mean, I think this is going to
defend yourself.
I think well, when I see people online saying that buy the shirt to prove Kinnear wrong, it feels like the type of thing I should put in for some kind of marketing award. We're delighted on the shirt sales. So yellow shirts. You look at all Adidas's data; they struggle to sell. We have had a yellow shirt in my tenure before, and it didn't sell particularly well. So the challenge to Addy and to the retail team was to design a shirt that we think the fans would love, and they loved it so much we don't have enough of them.
Yeah.
So we're delighted. It's great to see so many yellow shirts on a match day. It's a great statement across the league. I think we're going to win lots of games in it, and so it's been a huge success.
Yeah, and I suppose people will now say though, make it yellow every year, but I suppose it's not going to be, is it? Because there's a certain amount of scarcity that you have to tap into there to make it a success.
Yeah, it's a balance of we. And it was the same when I was at Arsenal. Arsenal's traditional shirt is yellow, and the away shirt is yellow, and the fans like that one, and it's put into a rotation. I think this will give everybody at the club confidence that yellow shirt should be a more regular part of the rotation. But I don't think it's something where the shirt will be yellow every year.
What will it be next year?
I can't tell you.
And
you can.
Will the retro badges be a thing that recurs as well? I know it's something Adidas have done across a range of clubs this year, but is that something that, because I think that has obviously added a huge amount to the sales here?
Yeah, I mean the Smileys worked. The Smileys worked really hard for us, and I think designers of shirts are increasingly looking for ways to differentiate them. I think Leeds have a problem. Our home shirt is going to be all white most seasons, and it's quite difficult to make that interesting and to keep it being something that the supporters want. So I think there are league rules around how I think you're allowed to change one badge once per season. So there are rules around it, and ultimately you probably on your home shirt want you probably want the sort of your primary identity to be featuring most of the time, particularly when you're in the Premier League and there's a global audience. But I think there are ways around it. So Arsenal sort of reducing their crest to just the cannon seems to make sense. So I think that's something you could expect to see more of.
Maybe a headless salute.
If we make it to the 10th anniversary of that badge, I actually wouldn't mind putting it on a kit just for a laugh.
What do you think?
Stick it on the first.
It's now a supporter suggestion. So like all good clubs, we respond to supporter feedback.
You're allowed to trash it as well now. Andrea's out of the building.
I think it'll be a nice break from the Red Bulls that we'd have otherwise at that stage.
Yeah, because I presume they're always going to be red going forward, because that's not a brand for.
No, I meant on the badge.
Oh, on the badge.
On the badge. Sorry, yeah.
You never know; they may even turn them blue just for us, or not.
Well, I think you've seen on the away kit that they are open to using tone sympathetic colours on our shirts. So I'm sure that debate will continue. But I think definitely the away shirt looks great because they were able to opt for an all blue branding on that one. But at the same time,
very diplomatic.
we are very respectful of the fact that they have invested a significant sum to have their brand represented on our shirts, and therefore they have an element of choice in how they want that brand to be represented.
Said like a true politician. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks for coming down, Angus.
Pleasure. Really enjoyed it,
Hopefully we
guys.
get to do it again next year.
Thank you.
We'll see you later.
The Square Ball Podcast.